My name is Luis Andezana. I'm Director of Strategy and Technology at Crown, a creative strategic agency in Seattle. I'm also president of the Seattle chapter of the American Advertising Federation. I'm co-founder of Seattle Creative League, and I'm creator of Diversity on the Dais, a brand new free platform to amplify underrepresented talent who want to speak, panel, host, or judge, so event planners can produce better, more diverse events. We're available at diversityonthedais.com. Since 3% began in the creative industry, I've had an opportunity to witness its impact from the start. Matter of fact, AF Seattle hosted one of the first 3% events at Wonderman Agency. Back then, you could really feel the lack of female creative directors, and being married to one, I could see firsthand what that meant. I remember my wife looking through communication arts annuals, looking in the index at the credits of some of the best ads, and feeling disheartened when she saw that there were like 2 or 3 female creative directors. It felt like, in a boys' network of advertising, it felt like just things. When were women going to get a chance? And when 3% showed up, she immediately felt a real difference. She felt possibility out there, just that somebody was listening and somebody cared. It made a huge, real impact. So in the same way, I'm so glad to see CAT's inclusion efforts extend to people of color as well. It's a natural evolution that they in our industry clearly need. The work's ongoing, so thanks to CAT and her team for their efforts. So a little more about CAT. Kat Gordon has been called the triple threat of an entrepreneur, ad woman, and marketing to women expert. She was named one of 30 most creative women in advertising by Business Insider in 2016, Visionary of the Year from Advertising Age in 2018, and one of 40 over 40 women disrupting the world in 2014. She's the visionary behind the 3% movement, which she started this as a passion project to spotlight a huge business opportunity in advertising, the lack of female creative leadership and its impact on connecting with an overwhelmingly female marketplace. The 3% movement has grown exponentially since its 2012 launch, hosting events in 17 cities locally and offering consulting and certification programs that amplify creative cultures. CAT serves as a strategic advisor to the Representation Project and 600 and Rising, which was also co-founded by former AF Seattle board member and friend Nathan Young. And she's on the diversity task force at WPP, the big holding company that owns Wonderman, where we had our first 3% event. She's passionate about unlocking the contributions of women and people of color, especially as they relate to innovation. So it's my honor to bring the founder and CEO of the 3% movement to our virtual stage. Everyone, please welcome Kat Gordon.
Hey, everybody. I'm Kat Gordon. It's such a pleasure to be here at Project Ascendance. Congrats on an amazing event. And I'm going to be sharing some thoughts today with you about why the future belongs to belonging. So I'm going to share my screen and talk you through who I am, my background, my belief about what the future holds, and how we all have a role in creativity and changing the world together. So let's share screen. Cool. So again, I'm Kat Gordon, and it's such a pleasure to be here at Project Ascendance. Super excited about the theme of this event and about telling you a bit about why I believe that the future belongs to belonging. Most of the time when you hear about the future or the greatest advancements that are expected for the next 100 years, you hear about technology, you hear about space travel, you hear about artificial intelligence. Everything is very kind of tech-driven. And I have a radically different view of what the future holds. I actually believe the most ancient premise of all, which is belonging, is the thing that will unlock insane and wonderful innovation. And I want to share with you why I believe that and invite you to look at how it could play a role in your own lives. So, hello. I want to tell you a bit about myself. I think knowing a little bit about who I am and the world I come from might help you understand where my point of view is informed. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an educator. I am actually an advertising executive. And I started something called the 3% Conference 8 years ago. It's named because 3% of advertising creative directors at the time were women. For those of you who are Mad Men fans, that's the Don Draper character. And sadly, that is not quite the quaint time capsule that we would like to believe it is. Sadly, most creative departments and ad agencies were very stubbornly male and white as recently as 8 years ago. And so I want to talk a little bit about what I've done over the last 8 years and why it's led me to believe this about belonging being so critical to innovation. So our drumbeat at 3% is that diversity equals creativity equals profitability. Essentially, the idea that if you have too homogeneous of a group, you don't have this amazing kind of collision of minds and of ideas that come up with true breakthrough thinking and innovation. And so I have devoted the last 8 years to building the business case for that, creating community around it, creating micro actions with our team, creating certification and workshops. And the people I've met along the way have been phenomenal and have convinced me, again, that the missing ingredient to truly innovative cultures is belonging, in a sense that you are in a place where you can be unguarded. So I just wanted to share that in the time that 3% has been running as a company, female creative directors are now 29% of the creative directorships. And at the agencies we certify, meaning that they're really demonstrating leadership on these issues, 35% of their creative directors are women. Mostly white women are prospering. Only 2% of creative directors are women of color, and only 9% are men of color. Our approach to dealing with that, which is really starting to get into this beautiful space and conversation of belonging, is we address intersectionality by what I call communication through demonstration. Our team itself is incredibly diverse. Half of the speakers that we have at our events are people of color. When we invite especially Black women to keynote at our event, they are not talking about diversity. They're talking about their own thought leadership, their own work experiences as the leaders they are. And then, of course, measurement is critical. So we measure representation with all of our certification clients. Agencies are also, and clients are all demanding diversity. The shifting demographics in America, social media feedback in real time from consumers, and streaming networks are just three kind of reasons why brands and agencies are realizing that diverse perspectives are mandatory. And I'm sure even your own viewing habits on streaming networks, you're probably watching, if you're like me, more television than ever before, really diverse storytellers. There's such an incredible, rich sense of stories being told, not from the usual suspects. Here's just an example of what I'm talking about. I love, Cindy Gallup has a quote that when you follow the status quo, you get Batman and Superman, nothing wrong with that. But when you invite everyone, you get Hamilton. And I mean, just from a profit standpoint alone, that show has broken all records. It's won all awards. I took my family to see it, and it's just so fresh and dynamic when you go see it. And there's so many other examples from the worlds of music and entertainment that show that diverse voices are so fresh and welcome. So essentially, when you talk about belonging, in my mind, it's creating an atmosphere where people do not feel like they have to cover, they don't have to camouflage anything about their identity, they don't have to code switch between different roles. And it almost comes down to the whole hierarchy of needs. When you have the psychological safety of bringing yourself to work and bringing whatever lived experience you have, whatever you think makes you quirky or weird, all of your wonderful idiosyncrasies, that is your ultimate contribution to innovation at whatever company you work for or whatever educational institution you're studying at or teaching at, whatever communities you are part of. And essentially, if you look at leadership and what kind of leaders are going to enable this type of accepting environment, and I don't even like the word accepting because that starts to sound like the old terminology of like tolerance. It's not about that. It's about an invitation. It's about understanding that having people that are super diverse is going to make you as a leader successful. Here are some of the things at 3% that we train leaders to embrace and embody. Things like embracing ambiguity, which right now through times of COVID is really a leadership skill on display. You don't know how long people are going to be working from home. You don't really know what the future holds. You just have to try to go with it and make people feel safe and heard and connected. A sense of optimism, collaboration, not being afraid of failure, understanding that making others successful is the ultimate way you look successful. These are some of the leadership qualities that create cultures of belonging. And I always say that the number one question, if you want to create any kind of atmosphere of belonging, is you ask yourself, who is centered and who is an afterthought? And typically in any kind of group, there's almost the status quo group, the inside group that, you know, all of the programs and policies of the company are centered around their needs, almost without even thinking about it. It can be something as small as the temperature of the office, how cold or warm it is, the hours the office is open, the types of social gatherings, where are they held, is there alcohol served? All of these small things telegraph who is centered and who is an afterthought. And in an ultimate culture of belonging, everyone is centered. No one feels like they were a PS that was dealt with down the line. They feel like they are a critical team player, welcomed for everything they bring to the table. And the path forward in terms of gender is highly empowered women. Women are already empowered. I don't like that term because it suggests it's something that you bestow upon women. But I use it in this sense of highly empowering women to be successful, kind of getting out of the way, understanding that women don't need to be workshopped or fixed. Same with any group of people in your organization. They don't need training to be different. You need to amplify their natural way of being and leading. And then high empathy men that understand how to put themselves in other people's shoes and support. There's an amazing book out right now called Permission to Feel by Dr. Mark Brackett, and we had him speak at our conference, the 3% conference. He talks about how every feeling is valid and that one of the best leadership attributes is to be able to recognize and regulate your own emotionality. And I don't say regulate in trying to squash feelings, just trying to understand and move through feelings of stress or fear and recognizing that that's part of the full human experience and being able to empathically sense the feeling of others on your team or in rooms or Zooms you're in. How are people feeling? Where's their energy? How's their eye contact? How can you sometimes just ask a question to show them that you're paying attention and you see them? These two things together is the path forward to cultures of belonging, no matter what level of leadership you're at. I love this quote, in order to emancipate women, you need to liberate men. We all need to have access to the full representation of our emotionality and our feelings. No feeling is wrong, including anger, which I love the book Rage Becomes Her, another author we interviewed at 3%, Soraya Chumali. Everyone needs to feel that their emotionality, their rhythms, how they work, how they're inspired, their passions, their interests, that's part of their personhood. That's part of that's the ultimate essence they're bringing to your company. And you want to not only normalize that, celebrate that. So much, I believe, of belonging starts by just listening. It's amazing how I've been in a room where someone will share something very emotional. And I remember one time in particular where I just made eye contact with the woman who had shared, and I said, "Thank you for your honesty." And she burst into tears. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I think she felt seen. I didn't try to sugarcoat what she'd shared. I didn't try to change the topic. I just thanked her for her honesty because I knew it was a lot for her to share with the group at that level of emotionality. Another thing that comes into play, we talk a lot in diversity circles around bias, but most of the bias we talk about, and I know there's unconscious bias trainings and things, but what I think of as the mother of all bias is something that really doesn't get talked about a lot or even recognized as a bias, which is compassion bias. Compassion bias simply means that as a species, we tend to have a bias to care about things that impact us directly or people we love. And we don't typically share our concern and advocacy and focus and attention on issues that we don't perceive intersect with us individually. And probably the story that most beautifully encapsulates a healthy relationship towards getting over compassion bias came from one of the youngest speakers we ever had at 3%. He was 17 years old when he was on our stage. His name is Matias Benitez. He was a high schooler from New York City, attending an all-boys high school, and he started a feminist club at the all-boys high school, which I thought was amazing. And I reached out to him and invited him and his co-founder, Matt Chen, to come and speak on our stage. And I asked him a question about when he decided to start this club. At the time, he was only 15 when he made the decision to start this feminist club. And I asked him, what made you decide that this was something you wanted to do? And he said the most incredible thing, especially for a 15-year-old. He said, it occurred to me that I should care about something that didn't impact me directly. And I think after I blacked out for a moment, because I just couldn't believe I was witnessing such a sophisticated human in such a young man, that's a beautiful example of compassion bias, getting over compassion bias. And the beauty and irony of this is that the more you do that and put that into practice, caring about things that don't appear to intersect with you, ultimately you realize that it all intersects with it all. The great human story of belonging is that we all are interconnected. We all need to rely on one another for us. We're social mammals. And so what might feel like you're doing something or caring about something outside of your immediate impact, you will realize as you get more invested that it's all a gift that you give to others and it comes back to you. Another big thing that signals belonging is pay equity. This is actually a quote that I said on the stage at 3% that is the most retweeted thing I've ever said in the 27 events we've done. And I don't think it's because it's an incredibly pithy thing I said. I think it's because it's one of the most universally embraced truths, which is that you cannot claim to value people equally and pay them unequally. So if you are working at a company that has not done a wage equity study, that is really an important way to signal to your people that you want them all, that you value them all equally and that they all belong. So highly recommend that. And I just want to go through a few things that in my 9 years of running 3% and the 27 events, all the different agencies I've sat in, doing our certification, all the conversations with leaders. These are just some truth bombs that I wanted to share with you because I think each one of these is like a nugget to take and to start to think in your own life about times that this is presenting, or maybe that you're even noticing your own response to something. And I want to just start with the word bias because so much about belonging and diversity inclusion centers on that word. There's unconscious bias training. Bias is called out in all sorts of things in the media, including like the presidential debates. And bias is not a dirty word. And the sooner that we realize that every single person has bias, it's actually a form of our neurobiology, or just the way our brains work. And I almost feel like the best use of my time as a leader who cares about diversity and equity inclusion is learning a little bit about brain science. I think it's a great investment of just read a few things or listen to a few podcasts about it, because you learn that the way our decision-making happen has an evolutionary basis. That doesn't mean that you're in the grip of it and can't overcome it. It just means that you don't hear that word and feel a sting of shame, because shame is a very immobilizing place. You can't get anywhere good from shame. As Brene Brown says, shame is a terrible social progress approach, something like that. I'm paraphrasing. So let's just accept that we all have bias and then get curious about what we're going to do about it. Another thing I've noticed is that a lot of times affinity groups or ERGs inside companies are a way that companies feel like they've done something. They kind of point to it and say, well, yeah, we're taking care of our women, or yeah, we're taking care of our LGBTQ community. And the first question I always ask is, what's the budget? Because unless something is backed up with true meaningful money, you're not signaling that it's the business value that it is. And so have the C-suite involvement, back this up with budget, show every community, again, who is centered, who is an afterthought, make everyone feel that they're an important part of the way your company or school or whatever community spends money. Confidence is a really interesting one, especially since I work primarily in gender diversity. So much lip service and workshops around women becoming more confident, women becoming more vocal, women becoming more loud about their own achievements. And the thing that is fascinating to me about that is that if you actually read about confidence, it does not correlate at all to competence. We have somehow believed that the archetype of the confident leader, traditionally male, equals competence. It does not. So I think our time would be better spent creating better ways to assess someone's skill than whether or not he or she speaks up about their achievements or is super confident, wants to get on stage. Find better ways to assess people's skills. That's a beautiful way to signal true belonging, also to people that are more introverted or just not seeking out the spotlight. Time mastery is a great example of a way to signal to people. And I think actually this one is probably one of the most relevant to this moment in our history. People are working from all sorts of places, from home. They're working from unique spots, maybe at vacation locations. People are not back in the office, or some are. Students are not back in school, some are. And really what this is doing is it's showing that old notion of presenteeism, which means if your butt is not in a seat in this building between these hours, you are not working. And there has been a chorus of voices saying, I believe I do my best work elsewhere. I do my best work when I'm doing something rhythmic, like walking or swimming or biking. And this is a great reminder that giving people mastery over how they do their work, when they do their work, is another form of saying that they belong. It's saying the way I trust you as a grown-up, I hired you as a grown-up, I believe your contributions and gifts will happen from wherever in the world you happen to be. And lastly, I want to talk about ageism, which is something that has been a really potent tool when you're talking to people about diversity, belonging. And I say that because ageism is the one ism that every single person experiences twice in their life. Once when they're deemed too young to make a valuable contribution, and once when they're deemed too old to be relevant to especially newer trends. This is especially true in advertising, my world. They say advertising eats its old. You're considered a dinosaur once you're 35, which of course is not true. And the reason I offer this up today is because if you're wanting to engage in conversation with leaders who haven't been on the receiving end of sexism or homophobia or racism, and they haven't quite had that lived experience, it's likely they might have had an experience of ageism, and it's a useful way to get them to remember what that felt like in their body, how they didn't feel they belonged, how they felt that some of the things they could have contributed got sidelined because of that blind spot. And once that empathy door is open, where they're remembering how that felt, it's a beautiful way to segue into other communities inside your company that might be needing their empathic leadership. So keep that in your mind. And that's really the end of this 20-minute presentation. There's far more I've been thinking about. I'm writing a book right now called The Future Belongs to Belonging, How Inclusive Cultures Unlock World-Changing Creativity. It's filled with stories of people I've met on this journey, places I've seen, companies I've seen that have done amazing jobs of creating cultures of belonging. Some of what I just shared is to get you to understand what that even means, how to even talk about it. But I definitely encourage you to go to the 3% Conference website, where we have what we call our doable doses lists. Micro actions that you can be taking to create inclusive cultures of belonging. If you're interested in this topic, it's a great way to just start to think about incorporating those into your life so that you can create cultures where everyone thrives, everyone feels that they're not an afterthought. And I truly, truly believe that that is the breakthrough thinking that will save all the problems we're going to have to correct in this world and open up incredible opportunities for new advancements and new innovation and new art, and so much awaits us. So on the other side of radical inclusion is incredible creativity. And I look forward to seeing you all there in that future moment. Thanks.